Welcome to Unearthly Upstate. I am Mari.
And I am Matthew.
And today we are, because it's nearly Christmas, we are going to discuss one of the best, if not the best, Christmas movies ever made. And its connection, maybe tenuous connection, but still a connection to a city in New York. And the movie we're going to discuss is It's a Wonderful Life. Yes, Jimmy Stewart, Donna Reed, Lionel Barrymore. One of my favorite films. I recommend watching the black and white one. The color one is just creepy. When Ted Turner colorized it, I was just, ugh. But here's the ironic thing.
I remember when that happened.
Here's the ironic thing. My mom had a weird conspiracy theory, phobia, I don't know what you call it. She wouldn't allow color TV in our house because of radiation. So we would have to get black and white TVs. She would refuse to get color TVs.
Well, if she knew anything about the construction of a television, she'd know that the black and white tube already uses cathode rays.
Matt is one of those weird beliefs, and she just would not let us get color TV. But anyway, so when the whole brouhaha came up about him colorizing It's a Wonderful Life, it was shown on TV, the colorized version. But I had a black and white television. Yeah, so yeah, exactly. It didn't matter to me.
So it still came out black and white.
Yeah, it was the same when they colorized Night of the Living Dead. Guess who saw it in the original black and white? Anyway, even though that was the colorized version they showed on TV.
Yeah.
Neat. Okay, that's just a nice little aside. We did watch the movie again. Come on, it's Christmas time. Perfect time to watch that movie.
Yes. They made in, what was it, 1945?
Made in, well, the original story, which was called The Greatest Gift, was written in 1943.
Yeah, by Philip Van Doren Stearns.
Yes. And that's where a little controversy about the towns come in because of the original writer.
46.
46, yeah, because this was Jimmy Stewart's first movie after he had served in the war. Right.
Yeah, directed by Frank Capra.
And we were watching it again today. I guess this is the Cliff Note version of what it was, the plot.
Yeah.
But I really recommend watching this movie. It stands up today. The jokes still stand up today. There's nothing even really cringy. That
you even pointed out that the cinematography was very modern.
Yeah. I mean the
use of close-ups.
The one scene where he's getting the great news about his brother getting married, and he's got this job offer, but the whole plan originally was that his brother would come back and take over the building alone, and then George could go on his trips, and the camera follows George as he's walking across the train platform after finding out this news that his brother's plans have changed. And first of all, Jimmy Stewart's amazing in this film. Yeah. It's one of my favorite films of Jimmy Stewart. That and Harvey. Harvey's one of my other favorites of his. Yeah, Jimmy Stewart, I don't think ever made a bad film. But anyway, as he's walking across the platform, the way the camera follows him, and you can see how deep thought George is in. And if you look at other films at that time, a really introspective shot like that wouldn't. And again, I apologize. There's noises upstairs. I think they're moving something. Anyway, maybe they're bringing the Christmas tree in. That's what it is. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of swearing and arguing going around.
It sounds like a Christmas tree setup.
Yeah, it does.
Anyway, if you haven't seen the movie, please stop the podcast and watch it now. It's usually on TV somewhere, or if you're on streaming, you can get it on Amazon Prime. But the Cliff Notes version it opens with these three angels talking. And there's these prayers going out for this George Bailey. So they send Clarence, who's an angel that hasn't got his wings yet, down to to help him out. And we're giving the backstory of George and his life. It's an interesting story. And the main thing is George wants to get out of that town. He wants to be an explorer. He wants to go to college and become like an engineer or architect. And he's got big plans. But something always happens that pulls him back into the town.
Bedford Falls is the crab bucket.
In George's mind, yeah, it's a crab bucket. But
no, it literally is.
Yeah.
Not just in his mind, because crap keeps happening.
Yeah, keep him there. But
people keep effing up, And George has got to be there to pick up the pieces. I feel sorry for him.
I do too, but it's not necessarily a crab bucket because his friends get out of there. His brother gets out of there.
Only because George is there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
George is there to pick up the pieces.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point. George doesn't realize how far-reaching his actions are with people. I mean, we had one of the first ones is saving his brother's life when his brother was 5 and fell into the frozen lake. It caused George to be deaf in one ear
because of an inner ear infection.
Yeah. The main villain is
evidently they didn't have penicillin back in 1911.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
And the main villain is Mr. Potter.
Mm-hmm.
I swear they said his name was Harry. It's like a variation of Harry Potter. Because you do see him go by one time at a coach, and it's just an HP on the side. So I thought that was kind of funny. But anyway,
that is.
Yeah, Mr. Potter owns the bank, and he is pretty much a scumbag.
Yeah, he's a real
banker.
Scooby.
Yeah, this one guy in the FBI wrote an analysis of film and said it was communist because it was anti-banker.
It's an actual capitalist against a monopolist.
Right. And Potter's the monopolist and Bailey's the capitalist.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what I think they forgot. There were 2 bankers in the film. Bailey is a banker.
Bailey's a banker. Yep. Exactly.
As well. But it's just how they deal with
it's their
the
approach
business.
To banking. Yeah, it's different. Much different.
Some other things that happened to George when he, growing up, the pharmacist who's just got news his son died, and if you can make this connection, if you look at the Telegraph, his son probably died of the Spanish flu because it was 1918 on the Telegram.
Right, exactly.
And it said he died of influenza. So it was probably the Spanish flu. Probably, so the pharmacist is in his right mind. He makes this pills for these people, and George notices the bottle that he
made the capsules out of his poison.
His labeled poison.
And so he takes his time with the delivery, thinking about what to do.
Yeah, well, first he goes to see his father to ask him what to do, and his father's too busy dealing with Potter, because his father and his uncle own the Bailey Brothers building and loan company. He goes back, and the pharmacist is just ticked off because the pills weren't delivered, and he beats George on his deaf ear, but George stands his ground. For being a scared 12-year-old kid, he stands his ground good.
He says, "Look, you silly bugger, you were fixing to give this kid poison pills, you idiot.
Yeah,
because you're drunk."
Yeah,
and that's what he needed to hear.
Yeah,
but
he says, it's not your fault. I understand you're upset, but you put the wrong stuff in these pills. And then the pharmacist realizes that he's just shocked but very grateful. That George took his time, Let's see, other things that happen. He meets Mary. Well, actually, Mary was in the pharmacy that day having some chocolate ice cream. And you also meet the other woman, Violet. She doesn't play a big role, but she's around enough.
Yeah, she's one of the peripheral characters that George helps along throughout the course of the story. Yeah. Because she's trying to find her own way out of Bedford Falls and she hooks up with some bad relationships.
Yeah.
And so, difference between, building a life and chasing a lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's what she was doing. And so
but then
we get that.
Yeah, and then there's people, who are friends with George and his brother who go on to make good things. Like his one buddy, George had read him this article about how they're making plastics out of soybeans. So his buddy decides, hey, that's a great idea for a factory. And so him and his...
Well, he's originally going to build it in Rochester.
And
then he says... George says, "Why are you going all the way to Rochester?
Yeah.
Right here in Bedford Falls, there was an old factory where everybody just recently got laid off.
Right. Yeah, so you got plenty of workers.
Yeah, there's plenty of space there and workers.
You can get it dirt cheap, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so he latches onto that idea and develops it.
Right. And then here comes World War II. George has to stay home again. But he's in the home guard and all that. But his brother goes off.
Raid warden.
Yeah, his brother goes off and becomes this war hero.
Right.
then tragedy strikes. His uncle, who was supposed to deposit some money in the bank so they could keep the building and loan going, accidentally leaves the money in Potter's office. And this is the part that really ticks me off about this film. Well, ticks me off about the character. He goes to deposit the money. Well, he can't find the money. Right. Potter has the flipping money. But he never says anything. So Potter stole the money.
Yeah, Potter's a thief, literally.
You know, the bank examiner's there at the building loan, and of course now everybody's panicking because they can't find the money. The bank examiner's there, and George is at his wit's end. He goes to even ask Potter for a loan, and Potter's like, "Oh no, I'm calling the cops on you." Remember, Potter's the one who stole the frickin' money. Yeah,
he's the lowest kind of thief that takes the... Yeah, he steals the money right from the table.
Right. You know, you can understand how George gets to the point where he realizes his life insurance policy is worth more than... It would be the quickest way to pay this money off is if he was not around and they could collect the life insurance.
Well, because he was told by Potter himself that it was worth more than dead than alive.
And that's where he goes to the bridge and he contemplates suicide and instead has to rescue some guy who just jumps in the river. And that guy turns...
And the toll house attendant shines a light on the guy. George dives in, gets him.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's such cold water.
Oh yeah. Oof. So that's where he meets Clarence, and as George and Clarence are having a conversation, George is still very upset. He had gone home. His wife knew something was wrong. I mean, he was yelling at the kids. He was being really snappish. And then he went to the bar, which was unusual for him, too. Gets slugged at the bar.
Well, we're kind of backing up again.
I know, but, you just got to understand. Yeah. People noticed something was wrong with George. I have to explain that before he goes to try to, commit suicide. So then Clarence gives him his wish about never being born again, and we're given a quick view of things that changed in Bedford Falls. First of all, it's not called Pottersville. In
bright neon lights.
Yep.
Like it's a freaking casino.
And the main street is not this quaint, nice...
It's a casino.
Basically, it's a casino. It's like burlesque shows,
open-air
gambling,
casino.
And, boxing fights and things like that. Pawnbrokers. You see Violet. Obviously, Violet's took a turn for the worst. She's getting picked up by the cops, and she's...
Yeah, from one of the local, drink emporiums. Yeah, and the, putting it lightly, his mom doesn't recognize him either.
No.
And then he finds out that his little brother drowned in 1911 because George wasn't there to save him.
Yep. Just some of them quite,
it's just one blow after another.
So Clarence, he does realize, he did have a good life. So Clarence gives him back his life. And he goes home, and the bank examiner's there with the cops to arrest him. And, I should say they're probably state troopers because the local cops knew George, and they weren't there. And,
as a matter of fact, he ran into the local sheriff there for Bedford Falls, and he didn't seem to know anything about it. So, they had to be a state official of some kind.
But he's acting kind of erratically, so they're standing back like, do we arrest this guy? Because now he's all excited. He's like, oh, I'm going to jail. Yay! And turns out his wife had called everybody. She found out what happened through his uncle, that the money was missing. Yeah. Called everybody, said, we got to find George. This is what happened. And they all show up at his house. With hey, I got $1, I got $2 here. The one guy's like, I broke into the jukebox, and just dumps it out. And then they get a telegraph from his buddy who came up with the idea for making plastics with soybean oil, and he sent them $25,000, which was more than they needed. That's when the movie ends. It's like, everything's going to be good. But Potter is he's the one who stole the money. If they ever, I always wanted to see an epilogue where Potter got arrested. We kind of got that with the Saturday Night Live skit, though.
That's my only beef with the film.
Yeah.
Is that they treat Potter with kid gloves.
Yeah.
It seems. The gloves ought to come off.
It was unusual at that time for, I was reading in Wikipedia, that according to the motion picture code at that time, if a crime was committed, that person must be, some sort of justice must be done to that person before the end of the film, and it never happened with Potter in this film. Never did. It did later. Saturday Night Live did a wonderful skit with Dana Carvey doing Jimmy Stewart, and it ends on that, triumphant note, everybody singing Old Lang Syne.
Is it Phil Hartman?
Phil Hartman was in it, and I remember Dennis Miller, because Dennis Miller played his brother.
Yeah.
And and someone says, "Hey, Potter was the one who took the money. Well, let's go get him." The whole town marches onto Potter and beats
the ever-living crap out of this cripple.
So Saturday Night Live gave us the satisfying ending we've all been waiting for. It's a Wonderful Life.
That's terrific.
Well, okay, that's the movie. Well, like I said, it's a great movie. It's one of my favorites. I try to watch it at least, once or twice around Christmas every year. And I mean, it still holds up. There's a great bit. I finally got this one joke. I don't know why it took me till I'm nearly 50. But there's a scene where Violet's walking away, and the cop and the cab driver are watching her walk away. And the cop says, "Well, I gotta go home and check on the wife."
Right, exactly.
I was like, oh my god. I love it. Today I was like, why did I take me till I'm nearly 50 to get that joke? Oh my god.
Right, exactly.
Oh.
Suddenly dying for a quick one.
Yeah. Well, let's go over, why Seneca Falls? I mean, the writer of the original short story said he based it in a
Philip Van Dorenstern.
Yeah, Philip Van Dorenstern. Based it in a town called Califron, New Jersey. Now, I did go on the Google, looked at Califron. They do have the bridge there, and it does look like a very quaint town with the railroad hill. I can see that, and that's what the original story was based. And in the original story, it wasn't George Bailey; it was George Pratt, I believe, is the name of the character.
The Greatest Gift.
The Greatest Gift is called the short. Yeah, that's the short story. They don't lay claim to it. I mean, the writer says, "Oh no, it's this town," but the town never lays claim to it. So why did Seneca Falls think it's Bedford Falls? Well, they got some valid points. First of all, I will say there was another very big historical event that happened in Seneca Falls. We will cover it at a later time. We will talk about the Seneca Falls Convention and how it helped gather women the right to vote. That deserves its own podcast. But if you're thinking you know the name Seneca Falls and it's not related to It's a Wonderful Life, that's probably where you've heard it.
It's also a mill town.
It is also a mill town. Yep. Like I said, they've got some good points here. And this is from Beverly, a website that I think the city put together. The similarities between Bedford Falls and Seneca Falls.
Ah, yes.
And you just mentioned the first one. They're both mill towns. Now, Seneca Falls had a grassy meridian, the same as the one that George runs down at Bedford Falls. That meridian's gone now. We drove down their main street this last summer when it was creepy because everything was cold or closed.
I drove through Seneca Falls a few times on my way to a survey.
Yeah,
over the summer.
The meridian's gone, but the main street looks very much.
Oh yes,
like
the bridge is there and all.
Oh yeah. Now both of them boast Victorian architecture. Yes, definitely. Oh, yeah. Both towns have a large Italian population. Yes, you pointed that out today in the movie. Potter was also a racist.
Oh yeah, he was talking about garlic eaters and stuff. And,
and
making all kinds of slurs.
And I think it's time to mention that possible, what some people claim was a possible influence was an event that happened in Seneca Falls. Let me see.
Well, now, wasn't it a young lady that fell in near the bridge? I'm backing
it up. Here it is. Yes. Yeah. Some people believe this was the inspiration for the story. Now, going by what the writer said, this might be an inspiration for the story, but it sounds like he never heard of Seneca Falls. But there was a young man named Antonio Vericali, I believe that's how you say his name. On April 12, 1917, he drowned while trying to rescue a young woman who did survive. She had jumped in from the bridge, tried to commit suicide. He jumped in after her, saved her life, but he drowned. Now, he was 19 years old. This is also kind of brings in the attitudes we were talking about. The original newspaper story that ran mentioned the name of the woman, Ruth Durham,
Mm-hmm.
but would not mention Antonio Baracali's name. Only referred to him as the young Italian, whose first name was Tony. In response, the letter to the editor was written by William Boris Clark, who was the pastor of the Trinity Episcopal Church, and wanted his name fully recognized. So then the town comes together, and he was awarded the Carnegie Hero Medal, and they raised money to make sure that his mother and his sisters came over from Italy, because that was the reason he was there working.
Yeah, it was to bring, it was to give money to his mother and sisters so they could move over from Italy. And
they have a plaque, I don't know if the plaque's still there or not, but there's a plaque that explains who he was.
I guess it's been there since 1921.
Yeah. Some people claim that was an influence for the movie. Yeah, very similar. Yeah, you could argue, but nothing in Capra's notes, and I would say the way the author talked about the original story, it had nothing to do with it. It's just interesting that happened in Seneca Falls, and it's really interesting how the Seneca Falls people were like, hey, that guy deserves more credit. You know, he died saving her life.
At first it was planned that the George Bailey character wouldn't jump into the river.
Right, he doesn't either. I mean, he's thinking about it. He's contemplating
it.
Yeah.
So that's, again, how the script changed.
Yep. Now, the location is also perfect, because we have George's sister-in-law. His father owns a glass factory in Buffalo. What would you say? Well, would you say about 2.5 hours away from Seneca Falls?
Something like that.
Yeah, it's a drivable distance. And then Bailey's friend wants to build that factory in Rochester, very close to Seneca Falls, much closer to Buffalo. But, George convinces him to, build it in Seneca Falls. I mean, Bedford Falls.
Bedford Falls. Yeah.
See, I've been getting them confused now. The bank examiner, he's ticked off. He wants to get home to Christmas to his family in Elmira. So it happens in that area. So when the original writers say, no, it happened in New Jersey, then why mention all these other places? It makes no sense.
Rochester, Elmira.
Yeah.
A few others. I can't remember.
Yeah, but those are the big ones. Rochester, Buffalo, and Elmira are the ones I mentioned.
Yeah, the bank examiner, for instance, stated that he wanted to get this audit over with and get back to his family in Elmira for Christmas.
Right. Mm-hmm. Both towns had a train station. They were a major stop, yes. Mm-hmm. The only thing that's not mentioned about Bedford Falls, that Seneca was on one of the canals. There's maybe a difference there.
Right.
Although it's never stated what that bridge was over. In Bedford Falls, it could have been a canal.
Exactly.
Which the bridge in
it was
Seneca
a toll
Falls,
bridge.
Well, the bridge in Seneca Falls is over the canal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The bridge they claim is the It's a Wonderful Life bridge. The Bedford High School was dedicated in 1927, the same year as a similar academy in Seneca Falls was. Interesting thing about, I'm going to do a little side, the great scene when they're at the dance in the high school, and you hear about this pool underneath the gym floor. Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite scenes. Okay, because this guy's kind of ticked that George stole this date. Well, it was George went up and asked Mary for a dance on the bothering of her older brother, and this guy gets upset that George basically took the girl he was talking up away.
Right.
So he's feeling down his dumps, and this other guy shows up and goes, "Hey, did you know there's a pool underneath this floor? And you're standing right next to the button, and I happen to have the key." And they turn it on, and it starts opening. And they're busy dancing. They're doing the Charleston. And they don't realize what's going on. It's one of my favorite scenes, and they keep getting really close to the edge. And people are like, I'm like...
Well, we must be doing really good. Because they've got the gap to their bags.
Right.
While they're dancing back and forth. Yeah. And they come close to the edge, and then people react to that, and they're thinking, oh, wow, we must be dancing really well.
Right.
And then, they do this, 3 times.
Yeah, and then they finally fall in.
And they finally fall back in.
And then everybody joins them. Even the principal.
Everybody goes for a swim.
And what's the good thing about that is that that's an actual high school in somewhere in Los Angeles, and that the pool underneath the gym still exists to this day. And they did another movie where that became a plot point where the gym opened up. Yeah, so I thought that was kind of cute. In the film, the Bailey Savings Loan was assisting people to get their own homes, and they even had a subdivision called Baileysville, where a lot of people were allowed to buy their first home and get out of like the shacks and stuff they were in.
Potter's Field, yeah.
And
get the heck out of there.
The same thing happened in Seneca Falls. A factory opened by the name of John Rumsey also helped immigrant workers by lending them money and then building low-cost housing for them, and it's still known as Rumseyville today. Okay, so there's a nice correlation there. Now this one, the next one I seen mentioned, I looked up the guy. I don't know if this is a real... I couldn't find much information on how people viewed this guy locally, because this guy was a very prominent politician. He does have his own Wikipedia page, so it's kind of hard to tell. But there is a businessman named Norman J. Gould, who owned Gould Pumps, who are still in existence, and they are still manufactured in Seneca Falls. I found that very interesting.
Oh, cool.
But he was he was the richest man in town. He had great control of the local politics, and very similar to Mr. Potter in that respect. According to the one article I found, Norman Gould was also head of the draft committee. I could not find anything to support that, so I don't know if he really was. But I do know he was a very prominent politician out there as well. Those are the reasons why, people say that Seneca Falls is Bedford Falls. But I think the biggest support of it is the actress who plays Zuzu. When she visited Seneca Falls, she's quoted saying, "When I came around the corner and saw Seneca Falls Main Street, I gasped and said, 'This is Bedford Falls.'" She then saw the steel bridge that flows over the canal, and says, "It's a replica of the same bridge that George Bailey had grown up with all his life." So if one of the actors from the film is convinced, why do people think Capra was influenced? Because there's no proof of the fact that Capra said, "Oh yeah, it's a Seneca Falls." He could have called it Seneca Falls.
He could have.
But he doesn't. I don't know if that name was originally in the short story. I think
his Bedford Falls, naming the Bedford Falls, was a way of creating an Anytown, USA.
Yes, I do agree. Yeah, because you could... I don't care where you are in the United States, you watch this, especially from a small town or even a close-knit neighborhood in a larger town, a larger city, you can really relate to a lot of the stuff that goes on in the film. Like you said, you feel pity for George because you see his struggle to try to get out of there, but yet if he's not where he's at, so much things don't happen,
That's right, yeah. If it wasn't for his influence, his direct action that he took in people's lives, and just being there,
right?
Because the great advice he gave over the phone to his business, his former classmate about the plastics factory and stuff like that.
Right?
Even just comments and observations that George makes that influence people's lives, and for the better. He's the positive force.
Right.
His savings and loan is the positive force, whereas Potter's Bank is the negative force.
Yes. Yeah.
So you have, and same thing, you can couch it as good and evil as well. He's the good force and the bad force, and you see after he gets his wish and seeing what it was like if he was never born, you get to see what the result of letting evil roll over, Bedford Falls. It becomes Pottersville.
Yeah.
And then all this violence and drug use, and it really does become Anytown, USA.
Yeah.
In that regard, and Bedford Falls becomes the ideal that communities aspire to. that's also an interplay of light and dark.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is some argument to be made that Bedford Falls might be based on Bedford or Bedford Hills,
Mm-hmm.
which would be closer to what the original... They're down in Westchester County, the same county Professor X built his school in. Yeah. Anyway.
Right.
So
somewhere in upstate New York.
Yeah, so the original, if you go by the original writer's idea, yeah, these probably closer to what he wanted. Bedford, New York is very affluent, and it's full of colonial style architecture, not Victorian style, like Bedford Falls is.
Well,
and they have a lot of horse farms.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see anything about horse farms in Bedford Falls.
No.
So, and then, so it's not, it just doesn't have the right feel. Now, Bedford Hills is a little closer. It has a large Italian population.
Mm-hmm.
And the main street had similar architecture, but it doesn't have the bridge. You could make some argument that, some people say, well, maybe he just combined the two. He combined Bedford Hills with Seneca Falls, and that's where he came up with possibly.
As the director for the movie didn't write down in any specifics the influences for the decisions he made while directing, the names for places, the veneer of the place. Since he really doesn't set down any specifics, well, we can only guess, really. But at the obvious, these are obvious connections. And these are kind of obvious similarities.
And if you look at the geography, George felt trapped in Bedford Falls.
Yeah.
And if it was based where Bedford Hills is, well, that's 45 minutes away from New York City.
Right.
New York City was a long way away for him. So that just doesn't make sense. So, yeah. And also, Capra never visited the area or any knowledge of the town's connection. So, where some people do say that Capra did visit Seneca Falls, I did not find any
the main
to back that up as well.
Source of transportation out of Bedford Falls was the rail.
Yeah.
And the highway department wasn't as developed.
Yeah.
And throughout this time, from this period of history, you're talking a period of history from 1911 all the way up to the Second World War. Now, the highway department really didn't get rolling until afterward.
But I think when...
Yeah. And so there was really no way for anybody to just hop into their car, and you'd have to really plan this trip well. You'd be zigzagging through really rough road, some rough patches.
Oh yeah.
In order to get to the pavement.
Yeah. But I think one of the biggest clues that it is Seneca Falls is the street. The one street name is Genesee Street.
Yes.
If it was down in Westchester County, I doubt they would call it Genesee Street.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Genesee Street's a very popular name up here.
Oh, yeah.
Around the Rochester and Central area because of the Genesee River, Genesee beer.
Yep.
And
the old Red Eyes.
But that I think is the biggest clue right there. That Seneca Falls probably is the bigger influence because of the name of that one street. And that street is named in the movie as Genesee Street. So, yeah. I think that's the biggest one myself, actually. And there are people who broke down, they'll break down the town layout, and they can tell you where everything's laid out exactly.
Oh, my goodness sakes. There are people who've gone through this extensively, much more knowledgeable about little bits and pieces of information that have to do with the idea's development. A lot of influences that have to do with the place. And it's easy to draw connections between Bedford Falls and Seneca Falls.
Oh, yeah.
But not so easy to these other places that might have had a peripheral influence.
Correct,
Like, what was the other place? It was just called Bedford, or Bedford Hills.
Yeah.
The horse farmers. Yeah. That is like an upscale Bedford Falls.
Yeah. Now, here's a little twist to everything. In 2015, a Scottish village of Brigham was unofficially twinned with Bedford Falls. They've even changed their road signs.
Genesee?
So I think that's cute.
That's
so
nice.
We got Seneca Falls. I personally I do see the similarities. I mean, if you go to Seneca Falls and you're a fan of the movie, you can, even with the the widening of the Main Street area there, you definitely see that's Bedford Falls. There's no denying. I mean, we went over the bridge this summer, and it's like there's no denying that's. I mean, it is your typical steel girder bridge at the time, but just the way it sits over the canal, you just know it's that was the influence.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's other great things in that town. Like we mentioned, it was that's where the women's suffrage movement started in the United States, and they had I think it's the National Women's Suffrage Monument. I may have the name wrong, but it's a national memorial park there. And they also have this wonderful, we got to go back and go through it, but they have a wonderful art park or a statue park along the canal. And they've also got some great, they've got a lot of things there.
Yeah.
I can't
There's
name
a lot.
them all.
Just look it up.
Yeah.
And as for one of the actors
Mm-hmm.
who was in there, he played Mr. Martini.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recognize him from other films?
No.
The Burbs, for instance?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, that was the guy.
Yes.
Ah. Okay. Okay, well, to be fair, you didn't recognize Donna Reed right away, so.
Well, I thought she looked similar to one of the actresses who was who had a part in Gone with the Wind.
Was that
It was,
O'Hara was her last name, but I can't remember her first name. I was going to say Catherine O'Hara, but it wasn't Catherine O'Hara.
It was Scarlett O'Hara's sister.
Oh, okay.
Who
Okay, I'm totally off then. I'm totally off.
Who married Ashley Wilkes.
Okay.
And but
I am totally off right now. You can't trust me without me looking up on an IMDb.
Yeah, well, that's case mistaken. I did.
Yeah. We'll probably go over more of the history of Seneca Falls later. It's a beautiful little town, and this weekend, as we're recording it, they're having a virtual It's a Wonderful Life celebration going on. They usually do have it once a year. They invite any living actors in there to come visit, and they have a great museum which shows the connection between the town and the movie. And I do find it interesting that the other places that could be connected never advertise the fact that they are. Seneca Falls is like the only one it does. And I do really believe that they were the inspiration, really. Because you drove down Main Street, you tell me.
It's very much like, I'll vouch for it.
Yeah. It's great.
I can see that old grass meridian, where it might have still been. And of course there's the bridge and all the architecture, of course, dead giveaway. Mm-hmm. And of course the location in central New York, so close to all the other places like Rochester, Elmira. Right. It even looks the same in snow. Yeah.
But again, the Capra never put any of his notes that he visited.
No, never did.
Although one barber in the Seneca Falls remembered cutting Capra's hair. Uh-huh. But he didn't realize who he was when he was cutting his hair. He only remembered it. He only remembered it because their conversations with both being Italian immigrants, and the fact that Capra's name means goat in Italian. So it kind of stuck out at the barber's name, that he'd cut this guy's hair. But Capra never wrote it down that, I was in Seneca Falls, I got my hair cut. He never talked to anybody about it. So if you can make the argument that it's just all conjecture as well.
Right, exactly.
But I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it is. Of course, it could be any town. Like you said, Bedford Falls could be any town. And
Tom Bellissima was the barber.
Okay.
Recalls joking with Frank Capra saying that, Bellissima is a beautiful one. Mm-hmm. He says, I'm the beautiful one and you're the goat.
Right.
real supernatural connections or anything.
No, this one doesn't have a supernatural connection. It's just a neat connection for this time of year with one of the best films ever made. And not just best holiday film, best film.
I guess, George does become somewhat of a ghost.
Yeah.
Even to himself.
Yeah.
Which is kind of scary.
You could say that, yeah.
And that is frightening.
Mm-hmm.
And the frightening, terrifying experiences that he has in Pottersville, a.k.a. Bedford Falls, with all the familiar faces and some unfamiliar ones, too.
Right.
It's just, wow. I mean, imagine that happening.
Mm-hmm.
You get a hit on the head, or something like that. You get fished out of the river, and suddenly nobody knows who you are.
Yeah.
And all the things that were familiar have disappeared.
I mean, that way it's kind of a horror story.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's kind of a horror story.
He's really dropped into a horror show there for a while.
I mean, when he runs into Mary, and, he's acting all crazy.
Spinster librarian.
He's acting all crazy, and he goes, "You're my wife." Of course she screams. I mean, yeah,
She already looks like a nervous person.
Yeah. Oh, man. So, well, that's, I guess, our talk this week, I guess.
Yes.
And how It's a Wonderful Life was...
If it's a wonderful life for the holidays.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, if you haven't seen the film, watch the film. It's wonderful. Literally, it's wonderful. And I will say this one last thing in closing for me. It's a great film that teaches you a wonderful lesson about how even the smallest actions you've done in life have far-reaching consequences.
What if you didn't give that piece of advice to that one friend?
Yeah.
Or you didn't do that simple act of kindness.
Right.
That had a ripple effect.
Exactly, yeah.
Throughout their lives and others.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine not being there to create that influence.
Right.
And then where would that leave the other people?
Mm-hmm.
And his family was completely gone.
Yeah.
No children whatsoever through his marriage with Mary. And of course, everything he worked so hard to build and protect in Bedford Falls, such as the savings loan, gone.
Yeah. I
mean, even the whole town. And the place where, not Potter, but
who are you talking
Brain Fart, George's last name.
Bailey.
Yes. Instead of Bailey's, what was it?
Bailey's Building a Loan? Bailey Brothers Building a Loan?
Not that, but...
Baileyville?
Baileyville, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't have had Baileyville.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have had Potter's.
Yeah.
And it was a graveyard.
It was a graveyard when he went
That's
there.
right.
Yeah.
Bailey's Field was a graveyard. And it was filled with the bodies of all the people that he would have helped if he was alive.
The thing is, we concentrated on George, too, but I just made this realization.
What a Scrooge moment.
Oh, yeah. I just really made this connection today when I rewatched it. George isn't the only one who gives up everything. Yeah. Mary, always in the corner of their home, and then when she came back from college, she had a drafting desk, and she had artwork.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And you see it later when she's married to George. He goes over and he destroys these models she had built.
I assumed that it was his corner over there.
Oh,
that he was building all these places that he wanted to see because he was going to be an architect.
But that was the same drafting desk she had when he stopped to visit her when she came back from college.
You know how those things are borrowed.
I know, but I always thought that was her corner, and that she'd given up her.
No, Mary. He was busting up his own crap.
Oh, okay. Maybe I was jumping in there and thinking too much then. But
yeah, you were right. She had. Yeah. Made that illustration of George.
Yeah.
Lassoing the moon.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cute.
And and the people he helped, they turned right around, helped him. These little, you know, a couple dollars here, and then his buddy wired in the $25,000, which was more than they needed. But it all went, and you know, George would put it all into the building loan to help other people out.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah. So,
get the building and loan itself out of debt and stay in business.
Yeah, because they owed money to Potter, the thief. Potter, thief.
Oh, goodness sakes. Yeah. Let's not end the episode on him. God. No,
it's a good film. I really do think Seneca Falls is the inspiration. If not, it's very... there's a big coincidence that there's just so
too many coincidences to be ignored.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot, you could argue too, there are a lot of towns like that. Yeah, there are. But when you start naming streets, Genesee Street, and you talk about...
with a bridge over a canal.
Yeah, in larger cities, all within, you know, a day's
canals in
travel.
America in short supply.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that narrows it.
It could have been in Westchester County, because why would they be, you know, talking about, why Buffalo, why Rochester? Why? They wouldn't be mentioning Buffalo or Rochester or Elmira. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Like I said, there's nothing ghastly about this one, but, you know.
Well, we'll close by saying Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
And I'll just say Happy Holidays, and let's cover them all.
Okay.
I'm going to miss Festus. No, all right.
Right, exactly. All right. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Podcast, and CastBox. Please like, share, and review on your favorite platform. Unearthly Upstate is an Animator Liar production. The show is produced by Mari and Matt Manette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing by Mari Manette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Unless otherwise stated in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast are not paid or contact us for any type of promotion. Please check out our webpage for credit and sources for the episode. Thank you.